Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Search Off the Record, a podcast coming to you from the Google Search team, discussing all things search and maybe having some fun along the way. My name's Lizzie, and today I'm joined by Gary from the Search Relations team, of which I'm also a part of. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about dealing with non-web page content like PDFs. So, Gary, what's your least favorite file type? Your most hated, maybe.
Most hated. I don't think I have a hated file type. I think I have file types I don't like because they are not so compatible across platforms. So for example, when you have a proprietary file type, that's very hard to port from one platform to the other. Like for example, if you have, I don't know, like an Apple Note that will need some proprietary software on Windows or Linux to display. And those are generally not a good idea because then like you find something on the internet and then you download it, and then you also have to download something that decodes those file types for you to on your display. So I don't like those, but it's not like one particular file type. It's more like a category.
Yeah, I feel like there could be multiple things that if they just started enforcing that you install software to read the thing, then it would be
tons of them for good or bad reasons. I don't know. But like you can think of docx files like
doc.docx.
.docx. Yes, that's
yes.
This is great. In the same suite, you have the presentations as well, which are at least used to be a pain to transcode into something else.
Oh, the PowerPoints like .ppx probably. We could just do ASMR us reading file type extensions.
Or we could not. I think that's a better way to go about this podcast.
If we don't try, we'll never know. This could be what people are looking for from our podcast.
Do you know my favorite word?
No.
Correct.
It's too easy.
Right. So
proprietary file types, like those are bad because it requires people to install stuff, or it's just like more red tape, and it's better to be open.
I wouldn't say that they are bad because they have their own uses. Like, for example, if you download an AutoCAD file, which has some blueprint for something, there's a very good reason to have that in a proprietary file type or format, because the software that has to render that file has to be built in a very, very specific way to be able to display all the information that you put in one of those blueprint files. And yes, you can try to reverse engineer those, but you can also just buy AutoCAD and then support the work that they are doing. Okay.
And AutoCAD, are these files something that you would want to find from search? Like, is this in our list of things that we would index? Like, we could bring it back to scoping it to our podcast.
So our or Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it generally accessible and useful.
Yes.
Or universally accessible and useful. So from that angle, yes, we want to index those file types as well. But that doesn't mean that we will index all of them, because some of them are more prominent than others on the internet.
Oh.
So for example, if you go down the PDF route, PDFs are super common on the internet. Like if you go to the irs.gov website, it's littered with PDFs. Like,
do you think it's because it's easier to create a PDF than a web page? Like, why are there so many more PDFs? And it seems to be like increasing as well, that more people are making more PDFs, putting them on the web.
I've never thought about that. To me, creating a PDF is probably harder because I don't know how to create them.
But they have like apps that just can convert things to PDF. Like you just take pictures and it's like a page. Like each picture you take, it's scanning the document or whatever. And this seemed to be like a trend also for like at the start of the pandemic or not at the start of the pandemic, but once we were returning back to dining at restaurants and they started doing the no paper menu thing.
Oh, right.
People were making, like the restaurant owners were making PDF versions. So then you would scan that barcode to see the menu. And the easiest thing for them to do was probably just download a free app to convert their physical paper document into a PDF versus making a web page. Like, can you do that from an app on your phone? Just like take a picture, convert it into a web page. I don't know if it's as easy as making a PDF.
I mean, that's fair. But other thing I've seen at restaurants is that they actually have like a professionally designed presentation of the menu. And what I imagine that happened there was that they just point the QR code to a PDF that's uploaded And then that's the same PDF that they received from the designer that creates the menus in general, that they would print or they would have printed pre-pandemic. For me, it would be much simpler to just create a few pages on the internet like HTML. But then if you never worked with HTML, then it might be harder. And with PDFs, I imagine that it's more like a WYSIWYG editor where you can just drop boxes and then type things into it.
Yeah, it's much easier to design if you don't have, like for laying out things on a page, and especially if you want it to feel like a menu, maybe to retain that sort of same vibe that you're at a restaurant, like you're looking at something on your phone that used to be a physical thing, to try to replicate that as close as possible. Because if you're just doing menu items on a web page, you're basically ordering food delivered to you.
Right.
Might as well skip the restaurant experience altogether.
Yeah, right. So I don't particularly like PDFs. I see why, or I can understand why people do them and why they publish them. Like going back to IRS, like some of those forms, I don't know how you would present them on a web page in a way that you can print them and send them back to your tax folks. With a PDF, it's much easier to download because it's more intuitive. It's much easier to print them.
Oh, filling them out too.
Filling them out.
You can edit them and then print them out for these documents that maybe you need to fill in your information and mail it back to the government or something like that. You could just type.
Right. But then that also says something about the tax office, that they have PDFs and they want you to print these forms out and then send them back. So basically you are leaving a paper trail. In some countries, you don't have to do that anymore. Like you just put everything in a table, like a form, same way. Like it used to be that when you applied for a US visa or Indian visa as well, you had to fill out the form manually with a pen.
Like they would not allow you to edit and type and then send it in? Like that would be... Yeah,
you had to print it out. You had a hard copy and then you took that to the embassy or consulate. And then they would basically transcribe that into something else again. And that evolved for the US, for India. That evolved into an online form that you fill out, and then someone on the other end will check the details and will make decisions based on what you gave. So basically that PDF part just went away. And I can totally see that will happen with taxes as well, because in some countries, there's already no paper trail for taxing. Like you just do everything online.
But you could do everything online with a PDF.
Well, not if they require you to fill it out, print it out, and send it back.
Right, but you could just skip the mailing part and upload it.
If the tax office allows that. But sometimes they require you to mail it back. Like, for example, until I think last year, even in Switzerland, you had to mail back the forms. It was not that you can upload the forms, you had to mail it back. And in those cases, the PDFs are excellent, I guess.
Okay. And all this stuff, like filling it out at that point, like you don't want your own document to be showing up into search. People would want to find the forms, but not necessarily the ones that we fill out. Like if we were to upload it, like that would be bad if our personal information is showing up in search or something like that. So that is another problem, I guess, for them receiving like a digital file.
So,
or no?
Strictly speaking, and without empathy, it's not our problem. Because we index whatever we find on the public web. And if a website uploads private information, then we would index that. So strictly speaking, and without empathy, it's not our problem. Like basically we are going out on the web and we index public information, basically information that was made public. If someone uploaded their private data to some website and that website made it public, then we might index it. And we do have some measures to mitigate these kind of issues, but it's not perfect. So basically, people still have to ensure that they are not publishing their private information on the internet. Of course, they can also take it down, but that's for another episode or for an episode that we already had, basically removals.
Removals, but we didn't really talk about, I guess, personal information because that's sort of...
I mean, that's removing information from the internet. It's not, but basically you can use any of the things that we talked about. And with PDFs, we don't actually look... Well, not just PDFs, with any content, we don't actually look into what's in the content. So it's not like this document is talking about Obama or Trump, and then we want to index it because it talks about those things. We index it because it's from a high quality site, because people are talking about this topic on the internet, and so on. Basically, the normal indexing signals. It doesn't have anything to do with it has PII. And that's one of the problems with PII, that we can, in certain cases, recognize that something is PII if it follows a very strict format. But in many cases, that's not possible. Like, for example, an address shows up or an email address shows up on the internet. Do we index it or not? We don't know if that's a private address or it's a business's address or it's a support address or whatever.
Yeah, like it could be totally something that makes sense to have at the end of the PDF. Like this is like the restaurant's address, like you're looking at a menu or whatever, or like our robots TXT standard doc, like at the bottom, it's like, these are the authors, their work addresses are here, like we put it there, but it's not that we would consider that personal information. So maybe it's a context thing, but I can imagine why. Like, how can you tell it's an address? But is it personal? Did you not mean it for it to be there or not? Like, it's there. We can't decide based off of like the fact that it's an address only.
Right.
All right. So with PDFs, has anything changed? So I know that you wrote a blog post in 2011 about dealing with PDFs and best practices. Yeah, on our blog on Onesie, you wrote, we can index PDFs now. Like the blog post is announcing that PDFs can show up in search results. We can index them. The result shows up like this, and not much has changed in the result itself. Like it still is like, this is a preview of a PDF. The title, like it shows the number of pages, how big the PDF is. And you say some things in there that like we're still not able to do. Like we can't index images from a PDF like we can from a web page, but it seems like we can do that now just from like a test. So I searched for like pictures of cats and then limited it to file type PDF. And the PDF shows up as a result with an image like in Google Images. So that seems like change. But other than that, has there been any other?
I'm not aware of any changes. And that's the important thing, that with these weirder formats, the problem is that you have to convert them. We are not actually indexing the PDF itself. We are converting it to HTML and then indexing whatever we found in the HTML. Same goes for Word documents. Word, Microsoft Word, that's the thing. Like with Word documents, with presentations, with pretty much anything that's more, or at least leaning towards proprietary, we are converting them to HTML.
That's very interesting because it does seem like people are searching for, I looked up PDF popularity, and the trend for people converting JPEGs to PDFs is like the thing that people are trying to do, is to convert an image to a PDF, but no one's looking to convert PDF to HTML. Would this be something that, like if that existed for these restaurant owners?
Click on Google Trends.
Yeah.
Right. So you get relative
information. Okay.
So yeah, I guess that it's something like that. Like people are looking up that information to how to convert a JPEG into PDF that they can use like an online menu. I don't know why would that happen. I
guess like, is there a way that people could convert PDF and HTML, and would that be helpful, or like same difference? Like we can still deal with it in the end, so it doesn't matter like giving us an HTML. Like we don't have a preference between PDF and HTML necessarily.
We don't. And for the conversion part, I think it depends on what outcome you are expecting. Because if you want something that looks exactly like the PDF, then I think there's no perfect conversion tool for that, at least not yet. You are going to get something similar, but not one-to-one copy. But if you're a search engine, then that's not the goal.
It's just to extract the text and the images?
Yes.
Anything else?
And pretty much that's it. Maybe the metadata. But otherwise, you don't care that much about how it looks like, right? Like you might care about where the bolded characters are, or italics or whatever, or headings. But otherwise, you don't care that here's a box, there's a box, whatever.
Like the layout of the page is not...
Especially with PDFs, that doesn't matter that much, because there you have a long document that just has text all over them. The weight of the content is pretty much uniform across the whole PDF.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst with HTML, usually that's not the case. Like you have navigation, you have footer, you have pop-up boxes and whatnot. And there it matters where a piece of content showed up. Because if it's like in the footer, then it probably needs to have less weight than something that's in the center, like in the body of the document.
I see.
So with these conversion tools, our aims are different. And as far as I know, we are licensing something from Adobe, for example, to convert PDFs. And that's basically how it works. And we don't have that much control over what we are getting. Basically, we are limited by the decoder or converter that we get from whoever wrote the converter.
Mm-hmm.
Like basically, our basic needs is to get the content from the thing. And same goes for docs and Microsoft Word and presentations and whatever else we index, if it's one of those proprietary formats. And then we also index other weird TXT files and Python files and Java files and whatever.
Are we like indexing them to save them because they're helping for the web page, or because someone might be searching for the content that's in there?
No, that's the code.
Yeah. Like, are people searching for the code that's in there? Like,
basically, we are indexing the code as text because that's what it is. Like when you are coding something or scripting something, you are writing basically a prose.
Yeah.
And that's what we are indexing.
Would we ever return that as like an example, like someone's looking for examples of some code or something? Like,
sure,
we would return it as like you were looking for this. Like,
yeah, they do have harder time to rank, I think, but that's because of the structure of the page.
And we don't necessarily know like what is the purpose of this thing. Like, did they tell us it was a sample? Like, is there a title for the thing?
I mean, if you think about it, like when you are looking for, I don't know, how to split a string in Python, for example.
Yeah.
Then you very likely going to get some Stack Overflow, which has loads of information from really knowledgeable people about how to split a string and what's the most optimal way to split a string. But then if we surface a Python file that does exactly that, then you can copy paste.
But you have no context.
But you have no context.
Yeah,
is that a good way to do it, or is the least efficient way to split a string?
Yeah.
And I feel that Stack Overflow is a better choice because there you also learn something, or you get context about like how are these things happening, like the splitting, how it's happening, and you have loads of content that reinforces our ranking algorithms that this is the right thing for your query. While with .py document, you don't have that. You have the code, which usually is not that verbose.
I guess if there were comments in the code, but...
Right, but have you ever met anyone who writes elaborate comments?
Title and description for your code example.
Like if you are looking at my converter code, for example, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's just going to be looking at a thing with no context. And yeah. Okay, another aspect to dealing with non-web page content is putting them on your site somewhere. Is there anything that you should be doing? Like a person who has a website with PDFs, should they be putting them somewhere in their directory structure or grouping? Like from a management perspective, I guess there probably are things that make it easier from maintaining, like these are where all my PDFs are. Like I'm going to put them in the PDFs directory. But from Google perspective, like does that help? I guess more information from where the URL path that these PDFs are related to this topic.
I imagine it depends what you can do on your server. Because if you have like shared hosting and you don't have access to the, I don't know, if you run Apache web server and you don't have access to the HTTPD conf to create a global rule for PDF files, but you want to redirect them in bulk, then it's better if you have them in a directory. But then if you are on your own server and you can do whatever, then it doesn't matter that much. In those cases, it's probably better to have them spread out on the site, because then like all those issues that some people might have, like we talked about crawl, or people think they have, that we talked about last episode, or indexing issues, then it's not limited, or we can infer signals from basically any of the patterns. But if you are creating a single pattern, URL pattern, where you store your PDFs, then that's probably not that great, because then we will have to learn that that particular pattern is good. Versus if you spread out, then we will infer the signals from the already existing pattern where you also publish HTML files or text files or whatever.
So it's better to group them by topic and not necessarily by file type. Like what if it was images, for example?
Yes.
Also, yes. The same thing applies to images, videos. Like it doesn't matter, but it seems there's a slight preference to putting things in the directory that they're applicable to. Like instead of putting all of our images on 1Z in some /images directory, it would be better to have all the images that are in the robots TXT documentation in that directory.
Images are completely different.
Oh.
Like images, we index differently. Like that's a completely different indexer, same as video.
Okay.
It's actually the same indexer. But web content.
I know when the title of this, like web, text, non-web, all of this stuff is on the web. Like all of these
content.
Yeah.
And we should come up with a new word for this. Like text content and media content, that's indexed differently, like vastly differently, and usually presented differently.
What if it's an image of text and we can convert that? How do we know that we should be, this is like somebody took a picture,
but we would not rank that
they flattened the old
it. Tab or whatever we call it today. Like that image would not be ranked on the old tab. It would be in Google Images, but not on Basically, we index it for Google Images.
Okay, so we can see that there's text in this image and that...
Right. You would need the landing page. Like we would index the landing page of that image. Like we never just index an image on its own. It's always the landing page and then the image that is on the landing page.
Okay, so if you just had images floating in a directory and you never embedded one of them, like that's not going to happen. Like that, like good luck with that. It's not going to show up.
That's not going to show up ever. If it doesn't have HTML page that's hosting or PDF that's hosting that image, it will never show up ever.
And that's because
we don't have anywhere to send the user.
You could just send them to the image, like it's a link.
Right.
It's a page.
But image search is more about the whole experience than just the image.
Okay, so we've talked about PDFs, we've talked about images briefly, PowerPoint presentations. What are some other types of files that maybe people haven't thought about dealing with them on their site that you would want people to think about more?
Well, I want people to think about HTML files.
Like that they should stop putting, if they're putting content into another file, they should convert it to HTML.
I mean, what else can you have? You can have text files.
Text files. Okay, so I have an example. So we're exporting the Googlebot IP addresses into that text file. Is that fine? Like, should we be putting that into an HTML page?
No, it's the same as like having a, well, it's technically a text file, but it's a JSON object that we are exporting. Like at Google, we work mostly with protocol buffers, and then protocol buffers have like a definition, like a schema, and then you can export that into a textual representation. But that's not how it's used. It's used in an encoded form. And that's roughly how JSON objects are also used. Like you are exporting a textual representation to a JSON file. Technically, it's a text file, but then so is PDF because you have text on it. But we can index those files as well. And I think we do, because last time someone was complaining that we are not indexing or we are not exporting some IP address. Then I searched for Googlebot IP addresses, and that was the first thing that showed up.
It took you right to the list, because I was wondering, are we even returning that? Or in that, would that be...
It did, but it was also a personalized thing. Like it showed that I already visited that, so I might have gotten some personal boost, if that's still a thing.
Oh, okay.
Based on previous visits. I don't know if that's still a thing, but it looked sus. So we can index that and we can serve it if we have enough context. Like with those files, the problem is, I think, that we don't have enough context, right? Because in the text file, you have a buttload of IP addresses, IPv6 and IPv4, plus creation date or creation time or whatever the field name is. And that's it.
Yeah, there's no title. Like even in the URL path, like how could you tell what this was? Like the way that we named it, I think it's just like IP ranges, like for what?
Right. Well, I mean, from the file name, we could probably infer if we had to, but that's like such a tiny signal.
Yeah.
Because if we wanted to spam, like if we wanted to have a title like generic Cialis or Viagra or whatever, then that would also hint that that document is about like generic Viagra.json. Like, does that mean that the document is about Viagra? Probably not. But then, fortunately, people started linking to it with a very clear anchor text, usually very clear anchor text, and then we can infer
Googlebot IP address.
Right.
Then we know, yep, that's what this list is, and then return that if the query is somebody explicitly searching for that list, then yeah, good job.
And same goes for .txt files as well, or Python files, .py files. It's not limited to our JSON object. Other things that you can have on your side, XML files maybe.
Okay.
And those are weirder and more complicated, I guess, because some of them we don't want, some of them we do, right?
Like, why would we be returning like somebody's sitemap file? Like,
I think sitemap files we can actually index.
Yeah, as like a result. Like somebody's looking for our sitemap, and then we would say like, here it is. That's what you were looking for.
But RSS feeds or Atom feeds, I guess we wouldn't. And if I remember correctly, Bogdan Stănescu, one of our engineers working on Converter back in the days, probably 2008, 2009 maybe, he published a blog post about how we don't index certain feeds, but then other feeds we actually do want to index. Like, for example, podcast feeds. So it's like with XML, it gets really murky pretty fast.
It depends on what is the file content and not necessarily the extension that we're like, we can't tell based off of the extension alone that this is what it is.
I guess we can tell based on the content type, header, and some of the hints from the document itself, hints from the XML. Because if you start parsing the XML, fortunately, XML is a very structured thing. So very early on, you have to tell what the PDF will be about. So for example, for a sitemap, you have to declare the sitemap's namespace.
Okay.
Like the XMLNS attribute, yeah. And from there, you can infer what it is going to be. And then for RSS, Atom, you have different namespaces, so you can infer from there. But I imagine that also the content type header is different for those file types. So we can tell that we can index this, but not that.
And do you think are we missing anything? Like any new file types that have come about that we would want to add to our list of things that we can index?
For text, probably not so much. I haven't seen a new text format. And also the new formats that I've seen, I think I've seen a couple the past few years, they are pure text. Like it's not like it's a proprietary file type that we have to decode decode. But it's more like a text file that has a funny extension. And we don't actually care about the extension. Like we don't actually care if it's .py or .txt or .php. We care about what the server sent back and with what content type header. Like for example, with a .py file or a PHP, that's incredibly popular server-side programming language. It may happen when you access a .php file, you get source code, and then you can index the source code. But then if the server is configured to execute that code, then you are going to get whatever the code produces. So it could be an HTML file, it could be an image, it could be whatever the PHP interpreter was told to render. Like for example, you can bring in the image bytes from a remote URL and then present it through that script. Or you can just print hello world and print text/HTML content type header, and then it's HTML. So it depends what the server will do when you are accessing that URL.
Okay. And are these things that we'd want to index in the context of that page, similar to images, or it depends on if it's something that stands?
So if just an image comes back with just a content type image.jpg, for example, then we probably don't want to index that image in particular unless it's embedded into a page that's using that image. And then we would index the page, and then we would index the image reference. All right, can we go now?
No.
But we talked about everything. So we should really, really go and end this episode. Please? Pretty please?
Okay, fine, if you say please. Next time on Search Off the Record, we'll be chatting with Vanessa Fox in our Spotlight series, where we talk to someone who inspires us in the community. Well, we've been having fun with these podcast episodes, and I hope you, the listener, have found them both entertaining and insightful too. Feel free to drop me a note on Twitter or chat with us at one of the next events we go to if you have any thoughts. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you, and goodbye.
Well, goodbye.